all of you should be creating your own template for your own personal use. Now, in terms of the kinds of stuff that you would see in that template, I've got a list there. Your dimension and text styles, your title block, so you don't have to load that up. Everything that you need to get started. And if possible, you don't want to have to try and copy anything from a project you've already done. You want to be able to just start from, you know, a fresh palette, a blank slate, but not completely blank. So you can see there the list of stuff that I recommend. So if you're doing commercial work all the time and you're doing 3 5/8 studs with 5/8 gypsum board on each side, and you're doing that in 50% of your projects, put it in your template, and then you don't have to redefine it ever. And if you have a description of what you want your wall schedule to say for that wall type, 2 layers of 5/8 Type X gypsum board on 3 5/8 metal studs at 16" on center, bad insulation within. All that information can be stored in your wall type, and if you put that in your template, then it's there for you when you go to do your wall schedules. So common wall, floor, and roof assemblies, so the kinds of roof types that you use: walls, exterior walls, interior walls, doors and windows. So in my own template, when I get started on a project, I've got all that stuff built in, including door schedules. So if you folks look about 3/4 of the way down, you can have your door, window, and room schedules all ready to go with all of the columns that you need in your door schedule. So just an example here, I'm going to go and open up a template here. So for this title block, or for this template right here rather, we even have some sheets ready to go, so that when you start putting your views onto sheets, the sheet numbering is already set up as well. So here I have a list of sheets ready to go, and on my schedule sheet I've already got a door schedule, a wall schedule, ceiling schedule. So as I am beginning to add all of this stuff to the project, I've already got a door schedule with all the different kinds of hardware that's going to be needed in the door schedule, and that's all ready to go. So we'll talk about how you can get that going in your own template, and I certainly hope that you'll find all this useful. So things like your title blocks and all that stuff, all again ready to go. Just start drawing your design, and then you can start populating all that information onto your sheets. Now, in terms of setting this stuff up from the get-go, some of the easiest stuff to set up is your text style. So look at the bottom of page 1. Now, when you start with the out-of-the-box architectural template, so that's going to be your starting point. Now, when I use this template, I'm always struck with how many different dimension styles there are in this template. So I'm just going to draw a little wall here, and then we'll throw some dimensions down, and we'll just see what I'm talking about here. So, okay. So now, when I go into the dimension command, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 different dimension styles. Don't know why. Now, in most of the offices where I work, we probably have one dimension style for imperial, another one to show metric units, meters. If we're doing a site plan and we want to show metric dimensions, we'll have that in there. And then we might have another one for showing lengths of curved walls if you want a different dimension arrow on the end of the dimension line. So I might have 4 or 5, but in the out-of-the-box template, man, there's tons of them here. So these are easy to set up because you pick the dimension style and you immediately go to edit type, and all of your settings are here. You don't need to load anything else into the project. You just redefine the dimension style as you want. And then of course with your text styles, you go into the 2 or 3 dimension styles that are provided out of the box, and if you need more than this, you just define or redefine the text styles out of here and make new ones as necessary. Now, I have a typeface that you folks are welcome to have. It was from a CAD program that went broke back in the 90s, and somebody got a hold of one of the fonts that they had. Is anybody here, you know Francis Ching, the architectural graphic standards guy? There was a font that was made in sort of, I don't know, to honor his hand, the way he writes. It's called Tekton, Tekton, and I have it here, but you have to pay for it online. So there it is there. So this Tekton here, I bought that a number of years ago. But somebody made one that's fairly close to it, and it's a knockoff, and it's called Technical. This one right here. And it looks exactly the same as his font. So here, so if any of you want this font, I think I might already have it in the session 7 folder for tonight, so you could grab it and use it on your project, so you have a nice architectural hand font, which looks kind of like 95% like the Tekton font that you can get online. So obviously these guys, this CAD software, made their own knockoff, and then they went broke. And their gift to the universe was to leave this font behind for everybody to use, because I think Tekton costs, I can't remember how much I paid for it, $75 or something like that at the time.
How can we add the text to?
Oh, how do you add a font?
Yeah.
You, once you've got the font file, when you open up your computer, all you do is just copy it. You can drag and drop it into your fonts folder under C, right, under your hard drive, C, Windows, Fonts. Just drag it in there, and Windows will install it. I'm pretty sure, let me just check here. Just going to log in on our share out folder here, just make sure. Pretty sure I've got that there for you. I forget to mention it so many classes. Yeah, I guess I don't have it in there. So let me.
Session 7. Go to session 7. Yeah.
There they are. Yeah, technical. So there they are. So there's the regular one and the italics version of the same. So grab both of those. The reason there's this one in here that's called Mod 0, that's another font. And maybe I'll explain then what that does. I had a firm where I put Revit in for them. They liked the technical font, but they wanted their door schedules to show a big, fat, wide circle when they wanted that piece of hardware on a door. So if I go back and look at this, this one template we had here in the door schedule. So here, let me just put in the. Okay, so if I go and look at the schedules now, you folks can see we have the door schedule. There's that first door, and you folks can see all these different pieces of hardware here. What they wanted, like I'd just be happy with an uppercase X in the cell. X, yes, I need a deadbolt. X, yes, I need panic exit hardware. The firm had a long-standing tradition of putting a big circle in there, not an uppercase O. That wouldn't do. No, we had to modify the font file, so we got this big maximum sized circle, the largest that the font definition would allow, and put it in there. And so, here, I'll show you here. Okay, see that right there, that big 0? I wanted that thing in there, so I'd have to go into my schedule, my door schedule. There's my door, and if I wanted a deadbolt, I would. There it is. So now I just pasted that symbol in there. I don't have a keypad. I can't remember what the keystroke is, but if you put the keystroke in there, it would put that big circle in there. Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, wait, I remember why. Bear with me for a moment here, folks. I shall get this sorted. There we go. So that's what the firm wanted. They wanted a big circle in there instead of an uppercase X. And so if you're interested in that, having that big circle to use, it's technical CHP, and that's the one that you would see there in the session 7 folder when you use this technique mod _0. So that's the story behind that. So dimension styles, text styles, those are straightforward. I'm going to skip contour labels and spot slopes for now. We're going to skip over to the next page here. Family-based graphics. Now, a lot of what you put into your drawings, so for instance, these elevation symbols that you see in the background here, and you know the ones in Revit are square. These ones actually look like section heads. So for the last 2 firms that I've worked in, their elevation symbols that they've used since they've been in practice since the early 80s, that was a symbol they used for an exterior elevation, which I always took to look like a section head. Who knew? These are based on families. So later on you'll see how we load families into our project, and then we use that in our elevation symbols. So looking on page 2, now you can see all these different kinds of graphics here. They're superscripted 1, and some of them are superscripted 2, and some of them are superscripted 3. Now some things like a wall tag, so when you put a wall in your view, and then I use the tag tool. Hopefully you guys have all had a chance to use the tag tool at least once before coming to this class. But if I want to show what wall number this is, I just use the tag tool and I pick my wall. And right now this wall doesn't have a wall number, but I can give it one. So I can just say this is W1. Now you'll notice that this little symbol here has 2 little horizontal lines in it. And what this represents when we look at the symbol legend for this office, this means that the wall, the finish, and the height of the wall are only up to the ceiling. So what this means is that the wall is cut off at the top of the ceiling, and the finish is also cut off at the top of the ceiling. They have another tag which only has 1 line at the top, and that means that the studs go all the way up to the deck above, but the ceiling is truncated, or no, the gypsum board truncates at the ceiling. So they've got these different symbols that they can load in and use, and they put them on the wall so the contractor knows, oh yeah, this wall only goes up to the ceiling, and the studs don't go up any higher either. So depending on the symbology of the tag, the graphic appearance of the tag, the contractor knows whether this is a full or a part height wall with respect to going to the deck up to the floor next story up. So this is an example of a directly loadable tag. So when I use the tag tool here, I can have 5 or 6 different kinds of wall tags that I can use in my project. I just load them in and I use them. And if you want to choose which one you want to use, when you use the annotate and then the tag tool, if you want to choose which tag you're going to run with right now, hit the tags button here, and you roll on down to wall tags, and you choose which of your different wall tags you want to use. So if I just want to use my regular wall tag, I choose that, hit OK, and now I'm getting a wall tag that doesn't have any lines on it. It's just a basic looking, regular, everyday wall tag. And you can see there's a small one, and I have a large one. So in this template, I have, how many different wall tags have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 different wall tags that have all been loaded into the project, and I can choose which one of those 6 that I want to use. So door tags, wall tags, all the ones that are superscripted as a 1, you just load them into your project and use them straight away. Now, for other things like a grid, so here if I put a grid down into this view, if I want to change the graphic that this grid is using, it's in the type properties. So I go into edit type and I find the symbol parameter. So I'll find grid head circle listed in families under annotation symbols. Grid head circle. There it is right there. So that family was loaded into the template, and then after it's been loaded into the template, in the grid's type properties, the grid's been pointed to use that symbol. Same thing goes with your levels. So this level right here, this is a common sort of Vancouver style level head. People like to use a half bubble, put the elevation of the story inside the bubble, and then put the name of the level either underneath it or beside it, depending on the office that you are working in. So in this case, we find the level, we go to the type properties just like we did for grid, we find the symbol. There it is there, level head semicircle. So if I go down and look in families, under annotation symbols, there it is there, level head semicircle. So that is a family that looks like this. And we're going to make our own variant of this in a few minutes. So we just decide how we want it to look, we decide which fonts are going to be used inside it, and away we go. Then we load it into our template, and that way people will use this graphic in future projects. Now, the third kind is part of what we call a tag. So like that's callouts, elevations, and section tags, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. So now what we're going to do is we are going to create our own level head template. So flip over to page 3. Now if you look in the notes, middle of the page from top to bottom, but on the right hand side, you can see it says name and then 100 feet elevation, and then it's got a triangle and a heavy bar in it. So that's kind of more like a European style level symbol. And we are going to make one of those tonight, and we're going to show how to make your own grid and level and section head families from the templates that Revit already provides. Okay, so if you folks go to the File menu and then open the New menu, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to New Family, and once we are in the New Family dialog box, we're going to go into Annotations. Now just hold there for a second. I made you folks go through this process. File, New, Family, and then we went to the Annotations folder. You will notice that in the New dialog box there's also annotation symbol. You're like, oh, how is that different? This is what it does. It automatically takes you to the Annotations folder. They dedicated a whole button so they could save you 2 clicks. Really? Really? So just so you know what the difference is between those two. So here in the Annotations folder, we are going to open up the level head. So here is how it works. When you folks add a new level into your project at the very beginning of a project, the right terminus, or the right end of the level that you draw, is this point here where these 2 reference planes intersect. So our graphic for the end of the level is typically drawn on the outside here where the level line ends. Some people draw it over here before it ends. It doesn't matter. So what we do is we delete that little dummy line there and this piece of text, and away we go. Now, let's look at the Create tab. So when you're making your own section heads and level heads and that sort of thing, they're typically going to be made of lines here, black filled areas, like if you're doing a filled section head, you know, that's got a blacked in arrow instead of an open arrow. So lines, filled areas, and labels or text. Now labels are smart text. So if you want something in your family to tell you what sheet this view is going to be on, the label tool will do that. So labels report things like the drawing number, the sheet number. So if this is going to be a level, the labels can then report the height of the level and the name of the level. So that's what we're going to do right now. So we're going to use the label tool. And so in terms of our justification here, we're going to do the name field first. So have a look at that graphic. So what's going to happen is that the name is going to be here in this quadrant, and then below it in the next quadrant down is where the elevation is going to be. So what we want this to be is right justified, lower justified, right lower justified. Now why is this? Well, because we want the text to start at this line and then grow off to the left. Because we don't want the name to be left justified and then obliterate the triangle that's going to be drawn beside it. So that's why we were making it right justified. And the reason that we're making it bottom justified is that if the level name got unseemingly long, we'd want it to grow upwards onto another line above the level line and not to go downwards and then obscure the elevation of the level. So the elevation label, which we will add after this, will be top justified and right justified in the unlikely case that the elevation text is so long that it drops down onto a second line below the level line. So enough yammering, let's get going here. So we're going to start with the bottom right justified, and so when you click anywhere, so I'm going to click about here, and where you put it, it doesn't matter. It's going to pop up a dialog box here in Revit saying, which one of these labels do you want to use? So I'm going to double click on name. So there we go. So I hit OK, and there's the name text. So now I'm going to grab it, and I'm just going to nudge it down so I've got a little bit of white space between the text and the level line, which is represented by this reference plane. So that's done. Now what we need to do step 3. Select the label and go to its type properties. Make the background transparent. Make the leader border offset 1/32. Now the reason I'm doing this, folks, if you have a look around the edge of the text here, you can see that the border is quite some distance away from the text. Now this can result in your level heads and the annotations within them, the labels, obscuring other annotations around them. So if we make the border less, you can see how it dropped that border closer to the text. So it just means it's just going to take the space it needs to put the name in there, and then everything else is fine. So I hit OK, and that was step 3. So Revit doesn't have text snaps. This is step 4. As shown at right, line up the right edge of the label with the vertical reference plane in the family, and zoom in and use the arrow keys to move the bottom of the letters so that they are on the horizontal ref plane, and then move it up 1/32 of an inch. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to move it down until the text is sitting right on the level line, like so. This is the undocumented eyeball snap. You guys have heard of endpoint snap, and yeah, this is eyeball snap. There you go, I've got it. Now it says move it 1/32 of an inch upwards. So I select it, drag upwards 1/32 of an inch, and we're good to go. So on to step 5, page 4.
You just offset from this one.
I just used the move command. So I clicked on it, grabbed the move command, and moved it up 1/32 of an inch. So what I had done initially is I had the text so that it was right on the level line, and the edge, the border of the text object, the right border was on the vertical reference plane. And then from here, I moved it up 1/32 of an inch. Okay, step 5, copy the label downwards 3/16 of an inch to make a second copy of the label. So copy straight down 3/16 inch. Yeah. Yes, so, okay. Now, if you try to, let me just go back to where we were. If you try and move something up really, really small, you see how my cursor's got a block arrow? Revit assumes that if you aren't moving anything, if you're moving something less than 1/32 of an inch, you really don't mean to move it. True story. Revit is preventing you from making a movement of a 32nd. So you're like, okay, what if I want to move that up 1/64 of an inch? Revit wouldn't let me. And you're like, seriously? This is what you'd have to do. You'd move it up 5/64, and then I'd move it back down 4/64. Yeah. Now, for moving it up 1/32, Revit will actually let you do that. But the easiest thing is just to start dragging upwards and then type in the value. Oh, no, that's interesting. You actually have to go beyond 1/32 of an inch, and then it'll let you type it in. Interesting. What if I move up beyond and type in 1/64 of an inch? Ha ha! You know what? That's a win. Okay, the most retarded things really do make me happy. It used to be you couldn't move something in Revit 1/64 of an inch, but now you can. Yay for that. So the trick is just make sure you've rubber banded or moved your cursor up more than 1/32 of an inch, and then Revit will let you do whatever. But we just want to move it up 1/32 of an inch. Okay, so we're at step 5, which is using the copy command to copy it down 3/16 of an inch. Now, those of you who've worked here in the architecture industry for a while know that 95% of the projects that you do will be done in Imperial, depending on who you work for. And some of your projects, and they're often major ones, are still done or are done in metric. Now, even the most hardened Imperial contractor, after doing one project in metric, is a huge fan of metric from that point forward. But until we get rid of everything south of the 49th parallel, we're stuck with Imperial for the foreseeable future. So often as architects we have to do double duty with our projects, and sometimes you'll have a project at mid-span and we'll switch from being in Imperial to being in metric. So sometimes you don't always know where you're going to go. Offices who do both metric and Imperial jobs sometimes will have metric templates and Imperial templates in their office. I can understand that, but I try to avoid it. What we're going to make here tonight is this level is going to show metric and Imperial units. We'll be able to toggle which units will be shown. So the name will always be the same, but when we show the elevation of the level, we can ask it to show it in meters to 2 decimal places and in feet and inches to the nearest 1/8 of an inch, regardless of the unit settings of the project. So that's what we're going through right now. So what we're going to do in step 5 is we need to click this label and we're going to choose Edit Label so we can get it to report the elevation instead. So double click on Elevation in the label dialog and then click on Name and hit the red arrow button to remove it. So you get elevation up there, then click on the name row, hit the red button, and it's gone. Now, notice this little button at the bottom here. This allows you to override the units used by this label once it is inserted into the project. So what we're going to do is say, hey, you know what? This label is not going to use the project's units settings. It's going to be feet and inches, but we're only going to go to the nearest eighth of an inch. And we're going to suppress the spaces, so when it says 4-6, there's no spaces around the dash. It just pulls all that stuff together a little tighter. So it would do something like this, 4 feet 6 inches instead of this. Suppress spaces gets rid of this. So if spaces aren't suppressed, Revit puts that extra space on either side of the dash.
So we can't enable suppress.
Yeah, you want to check suppress spaces, and we're doing feet and fractional inches to the nearest eighth inch, regardless of the units in the project where we use this annotation. So there we go. Now, step 6, we are going to allow this label to be controlled by a visibility parameter. So what we need to do is go over and find the visibility parameter here and hit the little gray button so that we can control the visibility of this label. So we're going to add a parameter and call it Imperial Level. Imperial Level. And in the notes it says group the parameter under graphics. So right in here, instead of it being under other, we're going to move it up to the graphics category. So Imperial Level, graphics group, type parameter, okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, I'll just control drag this label down so we've got another one. So what this one's going to be, it's going to be our metric label. So just hold down the control key and grab that elevation label, click on it once and then control drag it downwards and you should get a copy of it. So we're going to work with the copied version here. And we are going to edit this label. So instead of the sample value being 4'6", I'll put in 100M, just so that I can see that it is the metric label. So out here in the background, it will say 100M instead of 4'6". How many people here have ever created an attribute in AutoCAD? Good on you. Get a life. Good grief. You created attributes, bunch of geeks. So then you know about the attribute placeholder that shows you where that attribute is sitting before you make the block. That's what this sample text is kind of like when you're making an attribute. Now with this one, before we leave this dialog box, we need to go down to the units and change this to meters. And I think in the notes, yeah, we're going to show the M for the unit symbol, and we're going to 2 decimal places. 2 decimal places, yeah. Okay, and okay.
Excuse me, how did you add the parameter before?
Oh, this one here? We went over and we hit the visible parameter, we hit the little gray button right here, and then hit the parameter at the bottom, the box at the bottom, to add a parameter called Imperial Level. So now what we need to do actually is in the end of step 7, we need to add a visibility parameter called metric level. So once you've got that metric level sitting there, select it, go over and find its visible parameter, and I know it's going to say equals because we made a copy of the previous one. We're going to make a new parameter called metric level, and we're going to group this under graphics as well. So what we have are two different labels reporting the same information but in different units. Now, what we want to do is we're going to stack them one on top of the other so that they are in the same position inside the level. So just grab your mouse and drag it into place, and you'll see that it'll snap vertically into place. You'll see the helper line, and then drag it over, and then finally it will snap into place on top of the other. So initially this may look confusing, but because of those visibility parameters, we'll be able to turn one on and the other off as desired. Okay, we are at step 8. Go to the Family Types dialog box. In the formula column for the metric level, enter not, and then in brackets, imperial level. So for the metric level, formula, not, and then brackets, imperial level. It's case sensitive, by the way, so you have to make sure you get that right. So what does this do? It says, well, whatever imperial level is, make it the opposite. So if I was raising my children 10 years ago, they'd probably use, that was fun, not. This is kind of the same idea. It's the opposite. So it takes the value of imperial level and inverts it. So as soon as that's done, move your cursor out so you can see what happens here. Metric level now has the opposite value of imperial. So I check it or uncheck it. Metric level takes on the opposite value. So now what we need to do is to create a couple of family types. So what will happen is when this level head is loaded into the project, we'll have everything set up for the user, so if they want an imperial level, that one will be shown. So here, click the new type button, and we will make a level called imperial level. And of course, make sure that the imperial level box is checked. Now we need to make a new one called metric level. So in this type, imperial level, of course, should be unchecked. So then you'll have imperial and metric, and everything should be ready to go. Okay, so what we will do, let's take a break for 10 minutes. You guys can grab a coffee and then we will carry on.